Hello and welcome to another episode of Life Stories Markham, the podcast. Life Stories is a channel devoted to providing our audience with a deeper understanding of various individuals and what's behind their public persona. I'm your host, Michael Heap, and I'm joined by my co-host, Neelesh Hathi, in the control room. On our channel here, Neelesh and I will delve into the life story of people within our community. If you're watching on YouTube or listening to the podcast, we would ask you to please subscribe so you don't miss a single episode.
We're joined today by Paul Couperthwaite. Paul has been curling at the Unionville Curling Club for 30 years. His family was involved in the original building of the build, and Paul's a volunteer firefighter. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Welcome. Thank you.
Good to have you, Paul.
Thank you.
Okay, so 30 years is when you started curling. Let's take you back 30 years, because I know you and I both have a son that's 30 years old now.
That's right.
So what was it that got you into curling back 30 years ago?
We had another couple that was friends of ours. They were interested in joining, and there was a mixed, was the league that was at the time the big league to join, right? So I'd curled previously in high school, so we joined up with them, and there was, like it is now, quite a few other couples joined at the same time. So it was a big group of curlers.
Sure. So you curled in high school, you took a break, you came back.
Yeah.
Did you pick it up right away?
Yeah, it was like riding a bike, I think. It's pretty automatic once you've done it. That high school, yeah, it was 4 years. It was only like once a week or that. We just come over to the club and curl.
Right. So you're curling now 30 years ago at the Unionville Curling Club, and you've got a family attachment to that club. Your father, I believe, was pretty instrumental at that club a number of years ago.
Yeah, my dad and a lot of he had three brothers actually that curled all at the same time. So there was four of them that were involved, and they were all involved at some part of helping build the club when they were starting the original building and that.
Okay. Wow. And Paul, yourself, you grew up in Unionville, which for our audience, Unionville was a village that's now really been encompassed by Markham, the city of Markham. So growing up in Unionville, where was your first home within Unionville at that time?
We lived on Maple Lane, which is on just off Main Street, south of the railroad tracks, beside Central United Church. My father built a house down there, and I had an uncle who lived at the bottom end of the street there. He had a house with a farm. The farm was on there.
So you were pretty close proximity to a family-owned farm.
That's right, yeah.
Right.
It was about the only barn in Unionville, I would say, right in town.
Sure. But at that young age, I'm sure they didn't force you to have to work on the farm.
No, nothing like that.
No.
We lived down there till I were 6 years old, and then we moved up to Wembley, just north of the curling club there.
Okay. And so over the years then, you've seen a tremendous change, I'm sure, within the village of Unionville. But going back even further, so your family history, there was a farm close to Unionville, and I believe there were other farms in the area that were owned by family members?
Well, yeah, my dad, he grew up over at Woodbine and 14th, which is now the Miller sort of yard. That's where their farm was. And they just had crops and cattle and other animals, I guess, when he was growing up. And he went to school on 14th Avenue, the Schoolhouse restaurant there. That's where they went to school when they were growing up. And
so the restaurant that many people in the area know as
that's
the
right.
School, back then it was actually a school.
It was the Schoolhouse,
and your father went to school.
Yeah.
Wow, that's quite incredible. Yeah. So then going back to Unionville itself, so there's a number of businesses, coffee shops, restaurants that we get to enjoy today on Main Street, Unionville. What was it like back then? Do you recall the types of businesses that were operating?
A lot of them at the time were mostly antique stores and that. Okay. And most of the houses were still residential. The Fred Varley house, which is sort of like small art gallery right now, that was a residence. The house across the road, the Old Country Inn, it was still a residence. Okay. And the Queen's Hotel, which is just north of the confectionery, the old Fire Hall confectionery, it had like a little candy store in there. And back when my dad was growing up, they actually had pool tables in there, and that's where all the youth used to go and hang out. They go up there and play pool and that. But yeah, when I was growing up, they had a little confection or a little store there, I guess. We go in and get ice cream, candy. The people lived right in the back there, the Finleys.
Nice.
So you can still see on the etchings on the wall on the bricks outside if people used to carve their names and that. But yeah.
Now, Paul, I remember the old Farm Hall used to be a ski store. I used to come up in the late 80s to come up and buy ski equipment.
Oh, yeah.
Ski
Yeah.
stores, right? Yeah.
That's right, yeah. You used to go to Two Good Pond and they were windsurfing and kayaking and all various types of sports activities. I guess they'd rent them out from up there.
Now, growing up in Markham, Unionville, when you were a young boy, what was it like? Was it more freedom than it is now, or what was it like? What did you do for excitement back then?
Back then, I guess, well, when we moved up to Wembley, Carlton Road just kind of ended north of Wembley, and there was a farm way up where the school is now, William Bursey School. There was a farm up there, and so there's this long laneway that used to go up there. So a lot of times we go up the laneway, and there's a river over there, and you go down in fishing, and I don't think we swam too much. We swam at the swimming club, was right by the dam there. There used to be the Unionville Swimming Club was there, and that's where we learned how to swim. They had a diving board right by the dam, and
So what we know today as Two Good Pond was a place for swimming.
that's right, yeah, that's where everybody learned to swim. There's on the main street just north of where the church is on the east side, there's a sort of a laneway there, and that's how you got back into the swimming club. You used to have to go there. You know, swimming would start at 1 in the afternoon. Usually they had lessons in the morning and just swimming, open swimming in the afternoon.
So, who were your best friends back then, Paul? And you still hang out with them?
Mostly they're through hockey or that. There's still a couple of people that I see occasionally, but there was, even on my own street, there was probably 4 or 5 young guys the same age as me, I would say, that we played a lot of road hockey and up and down the street. And we lived on Wembley, which was a great street because
Car.
there was no cars because it was a dead end, so it was perfect.
Buggy.
Yeah.
No.
So
So, Paul, you spent your career working for Markham Hydro,
that's correct, yeah.
but you also spent time as a firefighter. Maybe
Yeah.
you can explain for the audience how it is that you were a firefighter while also working for Markham Hydro.
Well, back when at first my dad was on the volunteers as well, and the fire hall was where the old confectionery or the fire hall sports confectionery is. That was the fire hall, and they built a new hall where it is now in 1978, I think it was. And so they were always looking for people to join up. So once I was 18, I was kind of looking at getting on full-time maybe with the fire department at one time. Back then they only had like a full-time fire hall over in Thornhill. So they only had like 20 guys probably. So I joined the volunteers.
Completely volunteers at that time?
Markham, the town, or like Markham and Unionville were completely volunteers, yeah, at the time, yeah. Thornhill was the only one that really had a full-time fire crew. So it was just, I guess, part of a natural thing. My dad was on there, my uncle was on there, my brother-in-law was on there, and I guess it was just, so I got on there at 18, yeah, and
Okay. But you decided not to stay on as a firefighter?
actually I got a chance to get with the hydro before I started. You had to be 21 to start with the fire department, and the hydro you could start at 19, so I decided to go through, and it was 20 years with the volunteers, so it was
Now, for those of you listening, and you're not watching, this is Paul Couperthwaite joining our guest on Life Stories Markham. Now, Paul, what was the criteria for joining volunteer fire as a firefighter back then?
there was a little, you had to be fairly physically in shape. That was pretty well it. The first night we went, they had a practice every other week, I guess. They'd have practices and all that. So the very first night, Hugh Allison, who is also a curler, I joined the same night for the first practice. And of course, that first night they had a fire call, and we went to our first fire call.
You did the first night?
The first night.
Okay.
And so back in those days, you stood on the back of the fire truck and there was a bar you held on to. That's all they had.
Really?
So yeah, we went to our first call. It wasn't anything major, but yeah, it was our first.
He was a member of my first curling team at Unionville Curling Club.
Is that, yeah?
Wow. Wow, incredible. I mean, talk about on-the-job training.
That's right,
I mean,
yeah.
The first night of training, off you go. To
Yeah.
a call.
That's how it was back then, I guess. Yeah.
And so obviously over the years you were on a number of calls, fire calls. Is there one in particular maybe that stands out?
I guess just the one they had down at McCowan and Steeles, they lost like it was I think 107 of the houses under construction at the time, and one started on fire. I can't even remember how it actually started, but one started on fire and another one, and it just kept sort of a domino effect. And at the time, none of the fire hydrants had any water in them at the time, and so they were all in various stages of construction. Nobody was living in them. It's sort of like they had a fire in Vaughan there a few weeks ago, and they lost quite a few houses. So it's similar to that. They had to tear all the basements apart. And one thing I remember is somebody saying, "What do you think's going to stop this fire?" And somebody said, "Steeles Avenue." So
Now, when a fire would happen somewhere where there was no fire hydrants, for example, north of 16th Avenue was all farmlands, what kind of technology did you employ in those situations?
well, they always had like a tanker truck. Each hall, Markham, Unionville, each had their own tanker truck, which had a larger volume of water than the pumpers. So they would be dispatched, and they have a big, sort of like a big swimming pool, porta tank they called it, and you just keep filling it up to supply the pumpers, and the trucks would have to come back to the nearest hydrant and fill up, and then go back up to the scene and dump the water again and carry on until it was.
And I believe you may have been driving some of those trucks at the time.
I was, yeah. Even at the very end, that was one of the jobs. There was 4 of us that were still on the volunteers, and that's primary. Our job was driving a tanker truck. If sometimes Stouffville or Richmond Hill needed, it was a mutual aid, they called it at the same time. You go up to another area, and just the tanker truck pretty well would be the only thing that went up there, and all you were doing was ferrying, like transporting water to the scene. So.
Right. I guess there's no more tanker trucks around.
Yeah,
In this area, right?
yeah, oh yeah, no, Unionville still has one. Yeah, oh yeah, for sure, yeah. Because there is once I think pretty well get north of Major Mac in Markham. There's no fire hydrants up there, so they would need one up there. So.
Oh, interesting. Now, I'm told that your father had an interesting situation that involved a lady who was working at the post office on Unionville Main Street.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
My father and my uncle actually, where the El Pocino restaurant is now, they actually built that building, and they rented the bottom out to the government of Canada. It was the post office. So one morning when my dad was still at home, the lady that works there came to the door, and I guess there was a bit of smoke coming out of the box where you drop the mail in. So she had went inside and called on the phone and said, "Bruce, I think there's a fire. There's smoke coming out of the mailbox slot." So he came down to the fire hall, which is just south of the building there, and got the fire truck himself and drove it up and stuck the hose down into the mail chute and put the fire out. So they figured somebody was dropping off a letter, had a cigarette in their hand, and the butt went into the site there. So
your dad was at the right place at the right time.
That's right. It's a good thing he was home.
Now, we've talked about a number of locations within Unionville. We mentioned Maple Lane and Station Lane and Wembley, but there is another street in our town that actually has your family name on it.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Couperthwaite. Is there, must be a story behind that.
Well, my uncle who lived on Maple Lane, he owned the property to the east going towards McCowan. And when they built Varley subdivision back in the late 60s, I guess it was, they had to put in a sewage facility plant somewhere. So they expropriated the property off my uncle back in behind there. And that's where the sewage plant was. And then eventually when they put the bypass in Austin Drive in, they incorporated Couperthwaite Crescent over there. So,
wow, this must be kind of proud to have your name.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah,
kicking around.
There is a Couperthwaite World on Facebook, and that is on the front.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, we learned something new.
That's right. Yeah.
Now, was there a big ceremony, or you remember?
No, I don't remember a ceremony. No.
Just the developer came and said, "Hey, let's make Couperthwaite."
Yeah, that sounds like a good name. Yeah.
Well, I remember when my kids were younger and we would drive around and they'd see Couperthwaite Avenue and they just assumed that your family lived down that street.
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
I used to say, no, they live over
there.
there.
That's right.
They don't live on that street.
And it's funny, sometimes we get, where we live, our house number is 47, and sometimes we get the mail for 47 Couperthwaite Crescent.
Oh, you do?
I don't know why, but the mailman must be.
Right.
But a few times, and we actually know the people, so.
Right.
Good. Well, Michael, is it time, you think?
I think it's time for
Rapid
Fire.
You and me, buddy. Here we go. Country music or rock?
Rock.
What kind of rock? Favorite band?
Aerosmith.
Aerosmith.
Yeah.
Cake or pie?
Oh, pie.
Pie. Say a word in Spanish.
Dos cerveza.
Excellent. What kind of pie?
This time of year, rhubarb.
Rhubarb. Chocolate or vanilla?
Vanilla.
Vanilla. That's pretty. Star Wars or Star Trek?
Neither.
Neither. Okay. Dogs or cats?
Cats.
Have you ever worn socks with sandals?
Never.
Never. Why?
Christine would.
What is your hidden talent? What was the talent that no one would know you had?
My humor.
Here you go.
Humor.
That's
You're right.
right.
No one would know you.
Yeah.
I think your talent is you're just always in a good mood.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Firefighting or curling?
Curling.
Curling. What is your go-to karaoke song?
The chicken dance. No. No, Bee Gees. Bee Gees, Staying Alive.
Big Staying Alive. Okay. That's it. Excellent. Rapid fire. Good work. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Listen, Paul, thank you so much for joining us today on this
Okay.
episode of Life Stories Markham. Now, if you know somebody out there that you think might have an interesting story, please let us know. Contact us at ideas@lifestoriesmarkham.ca. If you would like to sponsor the show, please get in touch with us at info@lifestoriesmarkham.ca. Now, whether you're listening to this podcast or watching it on YouTube, again, we would please ask you to subscribe to the channel. That way you will not miss a single episode, as all of our episodes will be there for listening or viewing. This program is produced by Nilesh Hathi Media, and you can reach Nilesh at nilesh.hathi@gmail.com. And all of this information is on our website at lifestoriesmarkham.ca. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.